The Galactic Council chamber was vast, a hollow dome suspended over a sea of stars. Delegates from 100 civilizations gathered beneath its glowing arches, each voice a different timbre of the cosmos. The chamber's walls carried the subtle hum of translation fields, turning every language into clear understanding. Yet in moments like this, silence held greater weight than words. Every new generation of council members, whether born beneath red suns or silver moons, was told the same thing on their first day: never interfere with Earth's fleet. No one debated the phrasing. No one demanded clarification. The statement was older than most empires present. It was recited like scripture, written into the core of interstellar law. And yet, few could claim to understand why. To the young empires, the rule was a riddle. To the old, it was a shadow from a history too dangerous to recount. The details had been buried, lost, or perhaps deliberately erased. Some whispered that Earth had once fought a war so brief and so final that records were sealed to prevent panic. Others suggested the humans possessed technology not born of science alone, but of something stranger, something still beyond the Council's grasp. In academies across the stars, cadets memorized the rule alongside coordinates, star charts, and tactical doctrines. Never interfere with Earth's fleet. The words sounded simple, almost harmless, until one noticed how carefully instructors avoided questions. A cadet who pressed too hard would receive the same answer: the rule is for your safety. The Dominion, however, did not fear old sayings. Across the galaxy, in towering halls of steel and glass, the leaders of the Dominion Empire studied the same rule and saw weakness instead of warning. Their empire was young compared to the Council's elders, but its growth was swift, its ambition sharper than most could stomach. They believed themselves destined to stand above the others, to break every chain of caution the Council wrapped around exploration. And so, when their scouts first glimpsed the silhouette of a solitary human vessel drifting along a neutral lane, the decision seemed obvious. Here was a chance to test the myth, to prove that the oldest law of the Council was nothing but an illusion designed to keep rivals in line. But in the Council chamber, far from the Dominion's war rooms, elders remembered differently. They remembered the last time a civilization had ignored the rule. The memory was not spoken aloud, but it lived in the eyes of those who had studied the sealed archives. They remembered a proud empire, long vanished from every star chart, erased so thoroughly that even its name was no longer shared. It had not been conquered or occupied. It had been removed, as though its worlds had simply never been. That was the shadow that lingered over the Council. That was the true weight of the ancient law. Yet the galaxy was vast, and ambition often burned brighter than caution. Among the Council's delegates, murmurs had begun to rise. Was Earth's fleet truly what the stories claimed? Could it really stand against entire armadas? Or had time exaggerated the truth into legend? The younger species demanded proof, claiming that rules without reason weakened the unity of the stars. Still, the elders refused to open the archives. Instead, they spoke with finality: respect the rule or suffer its consequences. Beyond those halls, aboard the Dominion's fleet stations, the admirals prepared. Orders were issued with the precision of a blade drawn from its sheath. Crews whispered with excitement as their vessels were fueled and armed. This was not a war, they were told, but a demonstration, a statement to the galaxy that the Dominion bowed to no law but its own. Far away, alone against the endless black, the human ship known as Valiant cut silently across the stars. To any observer, it appeared ordinary, no larger than the frigates of other empires. Its hull reflected faint light, its course steady and unhurried. Yet within its walls slept technologies no Council scholar had ever catalogued, and doctrines no admiral outside Earth had ever studied. The Valiant did not know it was being hunted, or perhaps it did, and simply did not care. The rule was ancient. The warning was clear: The galaxy had been told 1,000 times, never interfere with Earth's fleet. The Dominion knew this, and still, they defied it. The Dominion's capital world, Orath Prime, gleamed like a jewel against its crimson sun. Towers of black alloy pierced the sky, their tips bristling with communications spires that glowed like stars in miniature. From the great balcony of the War Assembly Hall, Admiral Serac looked out over the city with a pride that bordered on hunger. His empire was young, yes, but it was strong. In the space of only 3 generations, the Dominion had expanded across 6 sectors, bending dozens of smaller civilizations into its orbit. They were no longer content to obey the Council's rules. The rule itself fascinated Serac. Never interfere with Earth's fleet. He had heard it 1,000 times at the Academy, whispered almost reverently by his instructors. He had even seen seasoned officers fall silent at the mere mention of it, but Serac did not fear old warnings. To him, such silence spoke not of danger, but of weakness. Why should a rising empire bend its will to a race that hid behind mystery? The admirals of the High Fleet gathered inside the assembly hall, a circle of towering figures clad in steel-gray uniforms. Hollow projectors painted the chamber with star maps, their glowing points shifting as Serac waved his hand through the air. At the center of the projection floated the image of a single vessel, a Terran fleet carrier, identified as the Valiant. "This," Serac began, his voice echoing against the hall's high arches, "is the ship our scouts have tracked. One vessel, alone, crossing a neutral lane. No escorts, no fleet, no allies nearby." His words stirred murmurs among the admirals. Some smiled with anticipation, others with doubt. "They travel as if untouchable," Serac continued, pacing slowly around the circle. "They expect us to cower at the shadow of their name. I say no longer. The galaxy has been shackled by this rule for too long. A law without reason is no law at all. Tonight, we prove it." One admiral, a younger officer named Tarek, shifted uncomfortably. "The Council will not look kindly upon open defiance. They will claim provocation." Serac stopped, fixing him with a cold stare. "The Council is old, stagnant and fearful. They hide truths from us. They keep records sealed, legends locked away. Is that strength, or is it weakness? If Earth's fleet is truly invincible, let them prove it, and if not—" He gestured sharply, and the hollow flared brighter, the Valiant now surrounded by Dominion warships. "Then tonight, the Dominion will step into history as the empire that shattered the myth." The chamber erupted with agreement. One by one, the admirals pledged their fleets. 3 full battle groups, over 100 ships, would move into position. The plan was not conquest, Serac explained, but demonstration. They would surround the Valiant, force it to change course, and escort it to Dominion space. No shots needed, unless the Terrans resisted. And if they did resist, well, then the galaxy would finally see if the legends had teeth. Outside the chamber, preparations began at once. Hangar bays thundered with activity as engineers loaded torpedoes and calibrated plasma lances. Crews filed into their stations, their voices filled with a mix of pride and nervous laughter. The air carried a current of excitement. This was no ordinary mission. This was history. In the training halls, young officers whispered about the rule they were about to defy. Some felt unease gnaw at their resolve, though they silenced those doubts quickly. The Dominion thrived on victory, and no soldier wanted to be remembered as one who flinched at shadows. Meanwhile, Serac stood alone in his command chamber, gazing at the star map that displayed the projected route of the Valiant. His hands rested on the edge of the console, claws tapping a steady rhythm. He did not admit it to his peers, but deep inside he wanted the Terran ship to resist. He wanted to see the strength behind the legend. For in his mind, If Earth's fleet truly was the most powerful force in the galaxy, then defeating it would not only elevate the Dominion, it would crown him as the greatest admiral in history. Far. Across the void, the Valiant continued on its silent journey. To the humans aboard, the path was routine, a patrol across empty space. They traveled without haste, without escort, and without fear. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, indifferent and eternal, and in the darkness beyond those stars, 3 Dominion battle groups prepared to close their net. Ambition burned like a fire within them. The rule was old, their empire was new, and tonight they would test which held greater power. The void between stars was still and silent, broken only by the faint blue shimmer of the Valiant's drive trail. The Terran vessel moved with deliberate calm, its engines neither strained nor urgent. For all appearances, it was simply a ship, on routine patrol, unaware that anything stirred in the darkness around it. But the darkness was crowded. The Dominion fleets had moved swiftly, their formations unfolding with clockwork precision. 3 battle groups now formed a tightening crescent around the Terran carrier. Destroyers spread in picket lines, cruisers flanking like wolves, and 2 command dreadnoughts anchoring the formation. To the eyes of Dominion officers, the sight was glorious, a demonstration of strength, discipline, and inevitability. On the flagship Obsidian Fang, Admiral Serac stood at the command dais, hands clasped behind his back. The Valiant's image hovered before him, magnified 100-fold on the main display. Against the bulk of Dominion steel, the Terran ship looked small, even fragile. Serac's lips curved into a thin smile. "Transmit," he ordered. A comms. Officer tapped controls, and a sharp pulse shot through the void, connecting the fleets. A moment later, a voice filled the Obsidian Fang's bridge. "This is the Dominion High Fleet," Serac declared. "You have entered space claimed under our watch. You will power down your drives and submit to escort. Any failure to comply will be taken as hostile action." The bridge fell into silence as they awaited a reply. Officers watched with anticipation. Crews across the Dominion formation held their breath. For many, this was the first time they would hear the voice of a human in real time. The reply came, calm and clear. "You are mistaken. This is neutral space. We are on lawful passage. Disperse your fleets and return to your borders." The words were delivered without anger, without even the hint of threat. If anything, they sounded routine, like a warning issued by someone who had repeated the same line countless times before. Serac narrowed his eyes. "Transmit again," he ordered. "Tell them we are not requesting." The message was sent once more, sharper, laced with authority. And once again, the Valiant's voice returned with quiet certainty. "You are in violation of standing law. You will withdraw immediately." Now the bridge murmured with disbelief. Officers leaned toward one another, whispering. A single Terran vessel, surrounded on every side, was ordering them to retreat. It was unthinkable. Serac's patience frayed. He raised his voice so that all on the bridge could hear. "They have grown arrogant, hiding behind the Council's rule. They believe their name alone will drive us back. We will show them the truth." Before he could issue the final command, however, the Terran channel opened one last time, unbidden. The same voice, steady, measured, without the slightest tremor, spoke. "Again, this is your only warning. Leave now." The words hung in the air like a quiet bell, each syllable ringing in the ears of every Dominion officer. Some felt an involuntary shiver crawl across their spines, but Serac heard only defiance. "Enough," he growled. "Target their drives. Lock weapons." Across the crescent, Dominion ships aligned. Targeting sensors painted the Valiant in latticeworks of invisible light. Missile bays slid open, plasma cannons hummed, and torpedo racks flooded with power. Inside the Valiant, The crew moved with no sign of panic. On the command deck, the human captain, Commander Elias Kane, stood at his station, watching as red indicators bloomed across the holographic display. His officers reported calmly, voices steady despite the overwhelming numbers. "Multiple lock-ons, sir. All weapons trained on us. No evasive maneuvers detected. Their formations are closing in." "Orders?" Kane studied the screen for a moment longer, then nodded once. His reply was soft, but absolute. "Stand ready. Do not fire unless engaged." The crew acknowledged without hesitation. There was no chatter, no nervous fidgeting, only silence and discipline. Every officer on the Valiant had trained for scenarios, just like this, though none of them could yet guess what would unfold in the next few moments. On the obsidian fang, Sirac's eyes gleamed. He raised his hand, savoring the weight of the moment. The humans had been given their chance, he told himself. They had refused. Now the Dominion would write its place in history with fire. "Prepare to fire on my command," Sirac ordered. This legend ends tonight. Engines burned hotter, weapons charged brighter. The crescent closed tighter around the Valiant, like a predator preparing to strike its prey. Yet on the Terran ship, Commander Kane simply stood with his hands folded behind his back, his gaze steady as the lights of targeting sensors danced across the hull, his voice calm as the void itself carried across the bridge. "They've ignored the warning. Be ready." And in that instant, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The void lit up as if the stars themselves were holding their breath. 100 Dominion ships hung in a crescent around the Valiant, weapons locked and reactors burning bright. On every sensor, the human vessel appeared small, fragile, utterly outmatched. But appearances in space were often deceiving. Admiral Sirac dropped his hand. "Fire!" At once, the crescent unleashed its fury. Torpedoes streaked forward, their warheads glowing like falling suns. Plasma bolts sizzled across the void, leaving trails of burning blue light. The Dominion's barrage was overwhelming, a storm designed to obliterate shields, hulls, and every trace of resistance. And yet, nothing struck home. The torpedoes slowed as they neared the Valiant, their guidance systems failing, engines sputtering. Plasma bolts unraveled into harmless streams of light, dispersing like mist. Dominion crews watched in disbelief as their weapons disintegrated before impact. Entire salvos simply faded. On the bridge of the obsidian fang, Sirac's face hardened. "Report! What happened?" "Admiral," a sensor officer stammered, "our systems confirm full launches, but it's like their ship isn't where it should be." "What do you mean?" Sirac barked. "Their position. Shifting. Distorting. Coordinates don't hold. Every targeting lock collapses the moment weapons reach them. It's like trying to strike an image in water." Sirac's claws clenched the rail. He had heard whispers of such things. Rumors of quantum shielding, defenses that bent probabilities themselves. He had dismissed them as fantasy. Now, as he watched an entire volley fail against a single vessel, he felt the first stirrings of unease. Across the void, on the Valiant's bridge, Commander Elias Kane stood motionless. The crew reported status in calm tones. "Enemy barrage. Neutralized. No impact recorded. All systems stable. Hull integrity at 100%. Awaiting orders." Kane gave a single nod. "Hold. They'll try again." And indeed, they did. Dominion ships fired second and third volleys, each more desperate than the last. Missiles lost their guidance. Beams bent away into the black. Explosions bloomed harmlessly, light without force. To the crews of the Dominion, it felt as though space itself had turned against them. Then came the voice. The Valiant transmitted once more, the same steady tone that had spoken before. No anger, no threat, only quiet finality. "You are in violation of standing law. This is your final warning. Leave now." Every word carried across the Dominion fleet, transmitted into the ears of thousands of officers and crew. Some felt dread sink into their stomachs, though they dared not admit it. The humans were not boasting, not threatening. They were simply certain. On the Obsidian Fang, Serac slammed his fist against the console. "Enough of this trickery! Full advance! Close the gap and ram if necessary! Tear them apart!" Engines roared to life. The crescent tightened. Cruisers and destroyers surged forward, intent on overwhelming the Terran vessel with sheer mass if firepower failed. Serac's plan was simple. No shield, no distortion could resist direct collision. But the Valiant moved. In a single instant, the Terran ship blurred and split. Not into debris, not into shadows, but into three identical vessels, each moving in separate directions. Dominion sensors wailed in confusion, unable to determine which was real. One Valiant slid effortlessly above the formation, another swept below, and the third cut directly through the center, weaving between ships with impossible speed. On every Dominion bridge, chaos erupted. "Which one is the target?" "Our sensors can't confirm. They're all registering as solid mass. 3 ships, not 1. And then, piece by piece, the Dominion fleet began to fall apart. Weapons arrays shut down. Engines failed. Shield generators flickered and went dark. Entire destroyers drifted powerless, their systems unresponsive. Crews scrambled at their consoles, but nothing obeyed their commands. One by one, Dominion vessels were rendered inert, floating husks in space. Not destroyed, not shattered. Simply silenced. On the Valiant, Kane gave his first true order. Recover their crews. Deploy containment protocols. Drones detached from the Terran ship, sleek and silver, moving faster than the eye could follow. They slipped into disabled Dominion vessels, retrieving stunned officers and crew. Within minutes, thousands of Dominion soldiers found themselves sealed safely in escape pods, drifting gently back toward their own territory. Not a single life lost. And through it all, the Valiant glided silently, its mirrored forms folding back into one as though nothing had ever happened. On the bridge of the Obsidian Fang, Admiral Serac stared in stunned silence. His fleet, 3 full battle groups, had been dismantled without a single shot fired in return. His officers looked to him for command, but there was nothing left to command. The humans had spoken their warning. They had shown restraint, and still they had crushed the Dominion's pride in minutes. In the vast stillness that followed, Serac understood for the first time why the Council had written its ancient rule. Never interfere with Earth's fleet. It was not a law born of fear. It was a law born of mercy. The battlefield was silent. Dominion warships drifted powerless, their hulls gleaming faintly under the light of distant suns. Thousands of escape pods glided on automated trajectories, each carrying living crews who stared out in disbelief at the lone vessel that had undone them. On the Obsidian Fang, Admiral Serac stood rigid on the command dais. His ship, the last Dominion dreadnought still partially functional, flickered with alarms. Power reserves dwindled, half the systems had already shut down, and emergency lighting bathed the bridge in a dull crimson glow. Officers whispered fearfully at their consoles, but no one dared meet Serac's gaze. He would not, could not, accept this. "All ships, reboot primary reactors," he barked. "Force ignition if you must. I don't care what fails. I want weapons back online." "Admiral," his first officer stammered, "the systems won't respond. It's not a failure we can repair. It's as if they don't belong to us anymore." Serac slammed a clawed fist into the rail, sparks scattering from a broken console. "We are the Dominion! We do not yield!" The comms officer looked up, pale. "Sir, transmission incoming, from the Terran ship." The voice filled the bridge once more, calm, steady, merciless in its certainty. "Your forces have been neutralized, lives preserved. Stand down." The words carried no anger, no triumph, only inevitability. Yet to Serac, they were more cutting than any insult. He felt the weight of humiliation pressing on his chest. The galaxy was watching. Somewhere, hidden observers would carry this story back to every council world. His name, his fleet, his empire would be remembered not for victory but for shame. No, Serac roared. They will not have the last word. If weapons cannot fire, then we will turn our ship itself into a weapon. Set collision course. Ram them. The officers froze. No one moved. The order hung in the air like a jagged blade did. You not hear me? Serac thundered. Set the course. We may fall, but we will fall as warriors. Still, the crew hesitated. They had seen what the Terrans could do. They had felt their weapons turn to mist, their engines silenced, their ships unraveled without a single fatal strike. Even the most loyal officers knew, deep down, that to charge the Valiant now was not bravery. It was suicide. Before Serac could lash out again, the Valiant acted. The Terran ship shifted, folding light and shadow across its hull until it loomed larger than it had any right to. On Dominion sensors, the human vessel registered not as a frigate, nor even as a carrier, but as something impossibly vast. Dimensions bent. Coordinates flickered. For a brief, terrifying moment, Serac felt as though an entire fleet had risen before him, born from a single ship. Then came silence. His consoles died, his displays went dark, and the dreadnought shuddered as every remaining system shut down. Engines, life support backups, even manual controls, all gone. The Obsidian Fang drifted, powerless, at the mercy of the void. Serac staggered back, his chest heaving. He stared through the viewport at the Valiant which hung before him in perfect stillness, unarmed, yet invincible. Its restraint was more crushing than any weapon strike. They had not destroyed him. They had not killed a single soul. They had simply rendered his fleet irrelevant. His officers avoided his gaze. None spoke. None dared. The Terran voice returned. One final time, quiet as the breath of stars. You chose defiance. Your lives remain because we allow it. Remember this. And then the channel closed. No threat followed, no demand for surrender. The Valiant simply drifted past, resuming its original course as if nothing had happened. For Serac, the silence was unbearable. His pride screamed at him to act, to shout, to resist. But there was nothing left to command, nothing left to fight with. He stood in the dim red glow of a dying bridge, surrounded by officers who no longer looked at him with respect, but with something closer to pity. The Terrans had not killed him, but they had ended him all the same, far from the crippled Dominion. Fleet, the Valiant glided through the void, serene and unstoppable. Within its hull, Commander Kane gave no sign of victory. His officers carried on with calm efficiency, recording logs, monitoring trajectories, maintaining silence. To them it was routine. To the galaxy, it was revelation. And behind them, the Dominion's pride floated broken, silenced not by destruction, but by mercy. Across the stars, the silence of the Dominion's defeat was anything but silent. The encounter had not been private. Hidden among Serac's fleets were observers, council agents embedded under the guise of allied advisors. They had carried encrypted transmitters, devices designed to survive the chaos of battle. When the first Dominion volleys disintegrated, against the Valiant, their recordings lit up with data streams. When Dominion warships fell silent, those recordings became evidence. And when the Terrans dismantled 3 battle groups without a single loss of life, the broadcasts spilled into the wider galaxy. By the time the Valiant resumed its steady course, half the known sectors had already seen what had unfolded. On the crystalline world of Ishar, where cities hung in luminous webs above oceans of light, the council chamber buzzed with uproar. Delegates huddled in clusters, their voices raised in disbelief. Some argued that the recordings were fabrications, designed by the council elders to reinforce an old legend. Others stared in silence, their eyes reflecting the image of a Terran vessel splitting into three identical forms, moving faster than sensors could track. No hologram, they whispered, could fake the terror on Dominion faces. On the trade stations of the Threx Combine, workers abandoned their stalls to crowd around public hollows. The screens replayed the impossible. Missiles slowing to a crawl, beams unraveling in the void, entire fleets drifting powerless. The crowds gasped when the Terran ship deployed drones, retrieving every Dominion crew member, sealing them into escape pods unharmed. For the first time, whispers turned not to fear of human strength, but awe at their restraint. Even in the shadowed halls of neutral syndicates, where smugglers and warlords counted profits, the message spread. The lesson was the same. Humans did not fight wars as others did. They did not need to. They ended them without firing a shot. Back on Orath Prime, the Dominion capital, the broadcasts struck like lightning. Citizens gathered in plazas, their wide screens flickering with scenes of their proud fleets dismantled. The propaganda networks tried to suppress the images, but the data streams had already spread too far, carried by traders, couriers, and clandestine channels. What had been meant as a demonstration of Dominion power had become the greatest humiliation in their empire's history. In the council archives, sealed records flickered to life once more. Elders who had kept silent for centuries now exchanged knowing looks. They had always warned the young, never interfere with Earth's fleet. Now, the galaxy finally understood why. Yet not everyone accepted the lesson. Some species watched with unease, unsettled by what they had seen. If humans possess such technology, one delegate whispered to another, then why hide it? Why patrol with a single ship as if they are vulnerable? Why not reveal their strength openly? The elder, beside him, answered with a shiver, because they do not need to. Meanwhile, in the Dominion's fractured war council, voices clashed in fury. Some demanded vengeance, insisting that the defeat was nothing but trickery, that the humans had exploited cowardly illusions. Others, fewer but louder, begged for caution, warning that to press further would be to invite extinction. The Empire, that had once spoken with one voice, now splintered, its unity shaken by a truth it could not contain. And all the while the Valiant moved on. Its course never altered. Its captain issued no declaration of victory, no threat, no explanation. The Terran vessel gave the impression of a ship fulfilling nothing more than a routine patrol. To its crew, perhaps that was all it had been. To the rest of the galaxy, it was the most staggering revelation in living memory. For the Council Watchers who had transmitted the encounter, the implications were profound. Humanity had shown more than strength. They had shown choice. They could have destroyed Serac's fleet utterly, leaving no survivors. They could have turned the Dominion into wreckage scattered across the stars. Instead, they had preserved every life, returning crews safely to their empire. This restraint frightened some more than raw power ever could. If they can do this without killing, murmured one ambassador, watching the footage for the 15th time. Then what happens if they decide killing is necessary? No one answered. No one needed to. The galaxy had watched, and the galaxy had learned. Humanity was not to be tested. The rule had been clear from the beginning. Now it was not legend, not myth, not whispered warning. It was truth, broadcast to every corner of the stars, and in the quiet halls of the council, the elders knew. This was only the beginning. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had not known silence like this in centuries. Delegates from across 1,000 systems filled the tiers of the hall, their robes, armor, and crests shimmering in the glow of the dome's starlight ceiling. Murmurs had rippled through the chamber before the session began, but as the High Chancellor stepped forward, the whispers died. All eyes turned to the center dais, where judgment was about to be spoken. The Dominion delegation stood stiffly, their uniforms sharp but their faces pale. Admiral Serac himself was absent, recalled in disgrace to Orath Prime. Instead, their envoys carried the burden of defense, though their posture revealed what they already knew. There would be no easy escape from the storm they had brought upon themselves. The High Chancellor's voice rang clear, magnified by the dome's acoustics. The Dominion stands accused of violating the most ancient law of this council. You interfered with the fleet of Earth. Evidence has been reviewed. Witness accounts have been confirmed. Do you deny these actions? The Dominion's lead envoy, Envoy Malrex, raised his chin defiantly. We deny only the claim of wrongdoing. The law is unjust. It binds us to fear a single species while the rest of the galaxy advances. We sought only to test this legend and reveal the Council's deception. Gasps echoed across the chamber. A dozen delegates rose at once, voices raised in outrage. The High Chancellor struck his staff against the floor, and silence rippled outward like a wave. The law was not written in deception, the Chancellor replied. It was written in memory. You were warned. You chose arrogance over caution, and your fleets were unmade before the eyes of the galaxy, Malrex sneered, though his hands trembled slightly. Unmade by trickery, by illusions. What proof have you that their so-called mercy was not manipulation? How can you ask us to kneel to myth? The chamber erupted again, but this time the voices were not outraged. They were incredulous. Delegates shouted from their tiers, "We saw the recordings! Illusions do not disable reactors! Illusions do not spare lives!" The echo of their anger filled the dome. One by one, the Council's elder races rose to speak. A Thalorian elder, its crystalline form glowing with internal fire, declared, "We remember the last empire that broke this law. They too claimed Earth was a myth. They too are gone, their stars silent. Do you wish to share their fate?" A Saurian delegate slammed his scaled fist against his desk. "The Terrans showed restraint beyond any of us. They preserved your crews when they could, have annihilated them. And you call that deception?" Even those normally wary of Earth's presence spoke with sharp voices. If humans wished conquest, the Dominion would already be dust. The Council would already kneel. But they do not. That is the mercy you mock. Malrex faltered. He had expected skepticism, perhaps even secret sympathy. Instead, he found himself alone, drowning beneath a tide of condemnation. The Dominion had overplayed its hand. The High Chancellor raised his staff once more. The law stands. The Council is united. For violating the one rule that binds us all, the Dominion shall be sanctioned. A hush fell over the chamber as the sentence was pronounced. Your fleets are to be dismantled, your shipyards sealed, your expansion halted. You will withdraw from contested sectors and submit to Council oversight until such time as your empire proves it can act with restraint. This is the will of the Council. Malrex's mouth opened, but no words came. The verdict had been absolute. The Dominion delegation stood motionless, their pride stripped bare before the galaxy. In the tiers above, younger species watched in awe. They had always wondered why the law of Earth's fleet was spoken with such gravity. Now they knew. It was not fear that bound the galaxy. It was survival. And yet, beneath the unity of the Council, another feeling stirred: unease. For if Earth could dismantle fleets without killing, what could they do if one day they decided restraint was no longer necessary? The High Chancellor ended the session with solemn words. Let this judgment serve as reminder. The law exists not to bind, but to protect. Break it again, and the galaxy itself may tremble. The Dominion envoys left in silence, their empire broken not by battle, but by its own arrogance. And far, Beyond the chamber, the Terran ship Valiant traveled on, unheeding, its course steady through the endless dark. The galaxy had delivered its verdict. But in their hearts, every delegate knew the truth. Humanity had delivered theirs long before. The galaxy did not forget. Weeks after the Dominion's humiliation, whispers of the encounter had grown into stories, and stories into legend. Merchants retold the tale in the glowing markets of the Threx Combine, their voices lowered to a reverent hush. On distant mining colonies, workers spoke of the Terran vessel that halted entire fleets without spilling blood. Children of races that had never even seen a Terran drew pictures of black and silver warships, their imagined forms stretching like phantoms across starlit skies. In less than a cycle, the warning had shifted from ancient law into living truth. Never interfere with Earth's fleet was no longer a phrase muttered by cautious elders. It had become the watchword of every star-faring species, a boundary even the boldest dared not cross. And yet, for all the awe and fear, the subject of the galaxy's fascination remained absent from the conversation. The Terrans offered no declarations, no threats, not even acknowledgement. They sent no ambassadors, issued no statements. They simply continued. On board the Valiant, life carried on as it always had. The ship drifted through the quiet lanes of a frontier system. Its crew settled into the rhythms of their duty. Captain Ilara stood at the observation deck, hands clasped behind her back, watching the swirl of a pale gas giant below. She carried no air of triumph, no self-congratulation. To her, the incident with Sirac's fleet had been nothing more than a disruption to the patrol schedule. Her first officer approached, datapad in hand. Supply check completed. Engineering reports minor reactor fluctuations, but nothing serious. Noted, Ilara said softly. She didn't turn away from the view. The officer hesitated. The galaxy's still buzzing about Oreth Prime. Council broadcasts, trade rumors. They're calling us a phantom fleet now. A faint smile crossed Ilara's lips. They've called us worse. To the crew of the Valiant, their actions had not been extraordinary. They had followed procedure, applied protocol, and safeguarded lives. To them, it was not power that mattered. It was responsibility. They did what needed to be done, nothing more. But outside their hull, the legend swelled. On Oreth Prime, the Dominion struggled to maintain order. Citizens marched in protest against their leaders, demanding answers for the reckless challenge that had led to humiliation. Fleet officers whispered that their shipyards now sat idle, their proud war machines, dismantled under council oversight. The Dominion, once the galaxy's most feared empire, had become a symbol of arrogance undone. In the council halls, younger races found courage. If the Terrans could hold back the Dominion without striking a single killing blow, then perhaps the galaxy was not doomed to endless cycles of conquest and retaliation. Hope, fragile but real, took root. Yet not all found comfort. In hidden corners, rival empires began to study the Terrans with renewed intensity. Scholars pored over ancient archives, seeking every scrap of information. Strategists whispered of the day when humanity might abandon restraint. If this is what they call mercy, they muttered, then what lies beneath it? Back aboard the Valiant, the crew remained unaware, or perhaps unconcerned. During the evening cycle, the mess hall buzzed with casual chatter. Crew members traded jokes about maintenance mishaps, compared notes on personal projects, and shared stories from Earth. Not once did anyone mention the battle that had shaken the Dominion. To them, it was past. Duty continued, and there was always another patrol route ahead. Ilara lingered at the edge of the hall, listening. She saw in her crew the essence of their strength. Not pride, not ambition, but steadiness. Where the galaxy saw legends, they saw obligation. Where others whispered of phantom fleets, They saw nothing more than the work of another day. Later, alone in her quarters, she reviewed the next assignment. Routine survey sweeps along an uncharted rim. Quiet duty, far from politics. Her gaze lingered briefly on a news feed from the council, headlines blaring of Dominion unrest and interstellar. Unease, she powered it down with a sigh. "Let them talk," she murmured. And with that, the Valiant slipped once more into the endless dark, a lone vessel on an unremarkable patrol. But across the stars, its shadow loomed larger than any armada. For the galaxy had learned its lesson. Power need not roar to be felt. Strength need not conquer to be feared. And mercy, in the hands of humanity, was a force more unshakable than any weapon. The law remained unchanged, its words simple, its meaning eternal. Never interfere with Earth's fleet. The Dominion had tested it. The galaxy had watched, and now, forevermore, none would forget.